Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of What's in the Box. Today we are taking a look at a couple of Atari 2600 games, Seaquest and Polaris. So yeah, let's jump right in. Up first we have Seaquest from Activision. And some wonderful old school 1980s graphics on the front. A very, very exciting screenshot on the back. Cartridge is, this one has seen some better days, got a ton of plaque on it, as was pretty common with these Activision titles. Manual's in really good shape, and this was one of their better ones. In their heyday, they did a lot of very intricate color manuals. You got your story there, and what you needed to do in order to get the Activision patch. And as always, a little note from Steve Cartwright, who was the designer of this particular game. All right, and up next is Polaris from Tiger Vision, which is one of the rarer titles for the system. So yeah, get a good look there. Now, the cartridge itself is in pretty good shape. Unfortunately, at some point, the manual and catalog was submerged in water for quite some time, and as a result, it has been permanently fused together. So that does dampen the value some, but finding this game complete in the box is very difficult and very pricey. So even though it is very damaged, I'm still happy to have it. So, River Patrol, King Kong, Jawbreaker, and Threshold, some of the other games from Tiger Vision and Marauder. They didn't put out too many games, and most of their stuff is fairly rare, so having anything complete is wonderful. So now we're going to jump to some brief reviews on both games, so stay tuned for that. This submarine-based shooter has a bit of an identity crisis. You are in command of a state-of-the-art Polaris-class nuclear submarine. Somehow you've gotten yourself lost and ended up alone in enemy waters, and the only way to survive is to destroy the entirety of their army. The game begins with your sub confined to the bottom half of the screen. Alongside you in the water is an enemy sub that strolls across the screen. Thankfully they don't fire and can simply be dodged. While above you, several bombers patrol, occasionally dropping depth charges. The goal is to take out all of the enemy aircraft. However, doing so is fraught with peril. If you hit a plane, they would drop either a single bomb straight down or scatter several charges that cover a decent area, forcing you to move. Once the bombers are dealt with, the enemy will send a dive bomber, which is a small, fast-moving aircraft that fires torpedoes at you. Survive its assault and you're off to the second screen. The next portion is from the top-down perspective as you move through an undersea chasm on the way to the next battlefield. As you weave between the rocks, channel mines will appear in groups of 3 that block your path by moving back and forth. A single blast will destroy the entire row of them, however they are spread far enough apart that it's easy enough to maneuver between them. The screen scrolling will slow to a crawl when you get to the end, letting you know the next fight is at hand. The biggest issue here is that the game doesn't know what type of game it wants to be. The battle screens are lackluster due to the limited number of enemies you face off against, and the fact that the enemy submarines don't even fire at you. The undersea segments are just as dull, since the only way to really die is if you're a poor pilot and ram something. If they had focused on one screen or the other and really fleshed it out, it may have been better off. While the action is subpar, the graphics and controls are nice. If you're looking for a different shooter to play, you can certainly do worse than Polaris. This undersea adventure is one of the finest shooters in the 2600 catalog. You have sent your team of adventure-seeking divers to the bottom of the ocean in search of buried treasure. Unfortunately, they've run into some trouble and are in desperate need of rescue. Their only hope is you and your heavily armed sub to come pick them up. The game begins with you stocking up on air before diving into the crystal blue waters of the ocean. Soon after, groups of sharks and enemy submarines will emerge from the sides of the screen to try and take you out. Occasionally one of your divers will swim out, often being pursued by something that either wants to eat them or shoot them. In order to save them, simply bump into them with your submarine while shooting at whatever is chasing them. Rescue 6 of them and you'll be rewarded with bonus points as well as moving on to the next stage. While you're underwater, your oxygen gauge will begin to tick down, and an alarm will sound when you only have 8 seconds of air left. In order to prevent your death, you'll need to head up to the surface and refill your supply. This will cost you one rescued diver, meaning you'll have to save another one in order to reach the 6 to end the stage. If you make the mistake of servicing without a diver, your submarine will self-destruct, apparently out of shame for not doing its job. There are a couple of minor issues with the game, however they don't really impact the game too much. The first is that divers appear randomly, so you can have instances where you can be near death due to the lack of air and won't have anybody you could have rescued. The second problem is a cheap death between levels. There is an enemy patrol sub that moves across the surface of the water, and he moves while your air supply is being replenished. On later levels, when he moves quickly, if you end the previous stage anywhere on the right half of the screen, he'll hit you before you can begin moving. It's an easy enough thing to avoid, however it's frustrating the first time it happens. Even with the minor issues, this is one of the best shooters on the system. The graphics are fantastic, the gameplay is frantic, and the controls are tight. If you're a fan of the genre, check it out. Alright, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of What's in the Box. Stay tuned for more episodes in this coming soon.